Hello and good day. I hope you're doing well. Today, I'm here with a tutorial on grading for a wedding. In this kind of setting, what we need to convey is what kind of theme we want to use, whether we want to avoid a cinematic look and instead bring out that dreamy and romantic feeling that this work requires. So, the first thing I do is open up the footage. Damage wide gamut, damage intermediate, Alt plus S, Alt plus P, Alt plus P, Alt plus P. I create the contrast layer from here, turn off the so-and-so effect, and go to the parade section to check it. If you pay attention, the highlights are clipped at 0 and the shadows are in these areas. We can recover them with the tool, open up the highlights, but the areas that are lost, you can't retrieve them, especially in the shadow section. Or in spaces like this, you have to keep in mind that the cameras aren't standard, the environments aren't great, the cinematographer hasn't done a very good job, and we have to fix a number of issues in this work. Okay, I move on to the next layer, which makes things easier, and I pull the shadows down a bit so that the details in these areas become more visible. Here I try to open up the highlights that have been overexposed and then I adjust their boundaries. I should say you need to do this in the lift mode or you should move or pull it there. Now I go into the final layer and in the primary tab and the layer 20 shadow option we apply it. A bit of whiteness is added to the work. We also add a bit of sharpness to the work. In the layer where I stabilize the contrast, I also stabilize the shadows. Also note that this part is now completely opened up. I adjust the highlights in this section as well. Then I go back to the first layer and just a little bit lift the color and brightness. So in the saturation layer, when I adjust the saturation level, if you pay attention and observe attentively, the color range and contrast we have now are much higher. If you look at what was in the raw layer, you'll notice that the pixels were scattered in those layers, but what we have now is much more compact, balanced, and correct. Let's move on to the front layers, where we need to add and adjust the color touches. Here, I test to see which color I can add to this work. First, I add a bit of blue. It might be too much, so I reduce the saturation to a reasonable amount. In this next layer, I add the highlights that I want to bring out in the work. Now, for each layer we want to move to, we select this layer. I reduce its saturation. The skin tone is also correctly placed in the layer. There's really no need. I don't think we need to touch it. There's a bit of yellowness as well, which you can push towards the skin tone. I separate the skin tone for itself. I reduce its saturation a bit. With beam in this layer here, I can easily handle the effects. In this layer, I try to first make adjustments directly on the skin tone itself. I select the skin tone, add it in the detail layer, so that next times it can be added as well. Here the work needs to be done quickly, in a procedural way. We track it. In this section, we will now simply click on the option here, please, for clarity. I select beauty for the facial area and apply the specific method to beauty. In this section, we need to have the B. This is the mode. The range is set so that it doesn't burn. You need to adjust other settings here as well if necessary. add it. Then naturally I go to the input. I search for rain and add it. We apply some dreaming to the work. We control it in this section. And from this layer, meaning we reach this layer and let me check it. Okay, up to this point, keep in mind that everything is going according to plan. Now, in the effects layer, I want to add one of the other lights, and here it's lens flare. We can place it on the switch. On the aperture setting, as well as in other available options, we can adjust their individual settings. Here, I have set it to screen, which is automatically selected together with the layers. Okay, I select the first frame to make sure I am starting at the right point. Then I save the worksheet so that my progress is not lost. As I reach this part of the process, I increase the value and carefully control it in these layers, checking each one to see exactly where the changes are happening. This way, I can clearly observe how my adjustments affect the different layers and ensure everything is working as it should. This part, in this layer, we need to go back. Actually, in this particular layer, there's really no need for it anymore. Okay, now, let's carefully define its position and set it to block. Because now it needs to be placed, it is necessary for us to ensure that we can position it carefully and correctly on this axis. This step is important because accurate placement on the axis helps maintain proper alignment and supports the next stages of the process. We keep it right there for now, just for the moment. It moves so that it's not there until the end. Let's check the work. Let's adjust it a bit. The rest of the work is probably fine in most places now. Okay, let's move on. One of the other effects we need to apply in this segment is that we want to create a dreamy or surreal feeling. So I'll use a bit of this flavor and experiment with the masks, and this is how it should be done. We also need to sit with it for a little while. When we move out from the next layer of masks, we add some contrast to the work. In this part, I want to show you an effect that we can use in order to add a subtle dimming look to this particular section. I set the layer itself to the screen blending mode, and then I carefully drag it down from the curves section. A kind of glow effect is applied to the image. In this section, we can also edit the colors in the themes we have, so we can achieve any color we want. Here, I keep the same color and go into the effects to access the look. I add the film look, and I apply my final edit to the work. Any color that we need, we can apply effects to it here and achieve the result that I had in mind. Now let me do a quick review and say that I checked the issues people had. Thank you for following along with this tutorial. Please don't forget to like and subscribe. Thank you. Until the next tutorial. goodbye, and thanks again.